And then let's check if there are any apologies. Nandipa, are there any apologies?
Evening again, Chair. From the member side, there are no apologies, Chair. I only received an apology from the PLO about the minister who has another engagement.
The minister has another engagement this evening. Okay. No, let's register the apology of the minister. And the good thing is that the deputy minister is present, is on the platform. Thank you very much, Nandipa. I don't know who's leading the delegation from the DOD team, but I can see General Ramatswana. I think he will be in a position to help me.
Good evening, Chairperson. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Let me greet the Deputy Minister of Defense. Chairperson, I will be representing the Acting Secretary for Defense. She could not be with us today, given the fact that she's got a bereavement at home. With me, Chairperson, I am joined by the Chief of the South African Navy, Admiral Monde Lovisi. He's got his team that is currently based at the Navy headquarters in Pretoria. And there is also Mr. Livilo from the Defense headquarters, Chief Defense Material is here with us. And the Chair, the team, the presentation is ready. And with your permission, Chair, if I may introduce Chief of the South African Navy, who will then introduce his delegation and to be able then to take us through. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Even before I ask the Chief of the Navy to take the platform, our content researcher has produced a document that summarizes the previous discussion on the matter that you'll be presenting on. It's a two-page document. Dr. Janse van Rensburg.
Good evening, Chair.
Are you well?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Can you just beam that document and talk to it? Because it's simply just a recap on the previous discussion on the matter.
Is it visible, Chair?
Yes, it is visible. Now we've just redo it again. Please redo it. Right.
Is it visible now, Chair?
Visible, but do it. Yeah, there you are. Right. Yeah, please present it.
Okay, Chair. Good evening, Chair, members, as well as Deputy Minister and members on the of the SANDF. This was just a preparatory summary for members for the evening. A very short summary of previous presentations regarding some of the equipment maintenance projects in the SANDF, as well as some of the acquisition projects under Project Biro and Hotel. So very brief summary. Firstly, I just highlighted here from 2015-16 until 2021-22, the problems around the Navy's achievement in terms of its sea hours. And as members can see, the targets were at 12,000 sea hours for the year. It has been adjusted downwards to 10,000 and then later on to 8,000. And the actual achieved hours, they can see in the second line there, has actually decreased from around 10,000 in 2015-16 to 6,800, under 7,000 by 2020, which was the COVID year, which I think we should keep in mind for those low numbers there, but stabilized in 2021 around 7,000, which again missed the even lowered target of 8,000. I also included the reasons in the annual report that was given for the not achieving the targets, and mostly it's related to the issue of maintenance and repair. In the later years, also COVID-19, but again, the key issue here that the SA Navy stated was the issue of maintenance and repair. And I think the committee is well aware of this, and that's the aim of tonight's meeting as well, to speak about the maintenance projects. And this also underscores the portfolio committee's recommendations around funding for maintenance and repair, given the impact that it's had on the availability and achievement of sea hours. Then in terms of one of the, if you look at the sub-programs of the Maritime Defence Program, it's interesting to look at the allocations for logistics support. Logistics support has remained fairly stable, except for 2018-19, where it crossed the 1 billion rand mark, but it's remained fairly stable. However, it's not in this table. If we look at the most recent allocations going forward, there is an increase coming up in the next two financial years, this current financial year and the next financial year. But I think looking back at the logistics support capability and the fact that it's stagnated, basically tells a story of why there is also concerns around maintenance and repair. And then in terms of achieving your sea hours, for vessels to go to sea, the allocation, it's interesting to look at the allocations for fuel. And as one can see, allocation for fuel has also been relatively low, especially in the last 2 years, which might have been related to the COVID pandemic. However, if you look forward, again, not on this table, there is a significant increase in the allocations for fuel. That might be a positive indication for them to achieve their sea hours. Perhaps the Navy can expand on that, but it is perhaps a positive indication, or it could also relate to the increased cost of fuel, as we all know. So that was the overview, Chair and members, of looking back around sea hours and the reasons why targets were not achieved. Then on the 15th of February of this year, Arms Corps noted the following states of frigates and submarines in terms of their status. In terms of the SAS Amatola, it said it's currently docking an essential defect period. The SAS Spionkop is currently in ad hoc maintenance and repairs. And it said maintenance will be completed within 1 month from receipt of spares. So perhaps the Navy can also provide an update on the status of the receipt of spares and whether this has been completed. Isandwana, is currently undergoing ad hoc maintenance and repairs of the mast. So that was in February of this year. And in February, the SAS Mendi was said to be operational. So that was the status of February. The aim of this information was for members to compare it to tonight's presentation. If one looks at the submarines, the SAS Mantatisi is currently in docking an essential defect period. That again was in February. Queen Mujaji is undergoing preservation and pre-refit planning activities. So that, given the funding that's released by National Treasury, it would be interesting to see the Navy's plans looking forward on that. And our last submarine is currently in the refit process, and it would also be interesting to see the updates in terms of that. Chair, that was the status of the major vessels in February of this year. Just a context as well for members. We also have some new members on the committee looking at parliamentary intervention. In 2022, the Portfolio Committee of Defence recommended to National Treasury, as it did in 3 previous years, for a ring-fenced allocation of the midlife upgrades of the SA Navy frigates and submarines. For 4 years in a row, the committee recommended that. And ultimately, National Treasury responded positively last year by saying, consistent with the committee's recommendations, the Department of Defence has allocated additional funding of 500 million rand for this financial year, 441 million rand for the next financial year, and 480 million rand in the subsequent financial year for the midlife upgrades of the South African Navy's frigates and submarines. And I think this was a very positive initiative sparked by the Portfolio Committee, and that today's meeting is the first of looking forward at how these funds can be spent over the next 3 financial years. In this year's estimate of national expenditure, again said the department has allocated an additional 3.1 billion rand over the period to enhance border security, and that also includes the Navy's capabilities. Then just to quickly scroll over the 2 projects that the presentation also speaks to. This was specifically for new members on the committees, just to tell them what Project Biro is, the purchasing of 3 inshore patrol vessels for the Navy, and what Project Hotel is. And it's an important vessel in terms of our hydrographic capabilities, and that is currently under construction by South African shipyards in Durban. And then also included here, the committee hasn't received specific updates on these projects since last year on 28 February, where a detailed presentation was made, and it could be good for an update to be provided on this, as it will be tonight. Suffice to say that one of the IPVs has been delivered. By February last year, the second IPV seems to be at a very advanced stage of completion, with the whole assembly at 75% and other sections at around 95%. So the status of the second IPV can be updated by the Navy, and the third IPV was then starting with construction. Interestingly, for the sake of this committee that also looks at budgetary aspects, it was stated last year in February that sufficient funding has been availed to complete the project, and it would be prudent to receive an update on that. Chair, then in terms of Project Hotel, there were some delays in the project due to matters out of control of SA shipyards, but I think key for this committee to follow up on and to note was that last year, February, it was indicated that Project Hotel is fully funded, so there should be enough funds for this project. Chair, members, that is the quick background paper just to highlight what was discussed at Parliament in the past, and I think and I hope that it gave a good background and would link to what the SA Navy will be presenting tonight. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Dr. Janse van Rensburg, for the presentation, which is just a reflection on the previous presentation and the discussion arising therefrom. And I now invite the Chief of the Navy to take us through. I'm sure as he does his presentation, would also be touching base with what has just been presented to prove that these 2 presentations, are basically, complementing each other, or rather, today's presentation is the progress from the last time. Thank you very much. Over to you, Chief of the Navy.
Good evening, Chairperson, and thanks once again for this opportunity for giving the South African Navy to be able to present the update since the last report that has just been presented by the Honorable Member. To the Honorable Members of the Joint Standing Committee on Defence as well, greetings to the Deputy Minister of Defence, the Chief of Staff. Good evening. Chair, I've heard that you actually having a challenge of load shedding, I think so as all of us. Yes. So in the interest of time, I wouldn't like to prolong my introduction. With me, I have my Deputy Rear Admiral Hlana, as well as the Acting Director Maritime Plans, Captain Masimala. We will endeavor to present and update the Standing Committee on the 3 issues that we've been asked to present here. So without further ado, I would like to give the platform to Deputy Chief of the Navy, Rear Admiral Hlana, who will take us through the presentation that we've prepared so as to enlighten the committee in line especially with what has just been presented, and even more. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much.
Admiral.
Thank you very much, Vice Admiral. Rear Admiral Mhlana, over to you. Let me welcome all members of the South African Defence Force as introduced by General Ramazwana, who is leading the delegation. I also welcome the team from the DOD. Over to you, Rear Admiral.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Greetings to the Deputy Minister of Defense and the members of the committee. All protocol observed. Thank you, Chief of the Navy, for the introduction. The aim of the presentation is to present the SA Navy's plan to refit its frigates and submarines, and later provide the status update on Project Biro. The mandate of the South African Navy is to provide Chief of the South African National Defence Force with prepared and supported maritime defence capabilities for the maritime defence and protection of South Africa. I will speak on refits, critical success factors, and then the status update on both Project Hotel and Biro. As a background, the SA Navy's accumulated frigate and submarine requirements amount to an estimated 4.2 billion rands. Although the 1.4 billion National Treasury funding was made available to partially address the refit backlog, we must factor in the time to effect repairs, which is 18 to 24 months for a frigate and for a submarine. Armscott Dockyard is struggling currently to conduct refits within the time specifications, but is working on a turnaround strategy to fully execute its mandate as the SA Navy's primary repair, upkeep, and maintenance agency. In assisting the dockyard to ensure success of the turnaround strategy, 3 years ago, the SA Navy took from its operational budget to give funding to Armscott Dockyard for the establishment of what will be known as Submarine Repair Group to capacitate the dockyard with the personnel that it needs to conduct repairs and maintenance for submarines. Given the current refit backlog, Armscott Dockyard's capacity and procurement constraints, the SA Navy will, over the medium term, partially provide prepared and supported maritime defense capabilities for the defense and protection of South Africa and its people, which means that the priority will be our own internal borderline operations and that of SADC commitments and presently SAMIM. We will cut down on multinational exercises in order to ensure that whenever required, the platforms are ready for Operations Corona and Operations Vikela. We will only pick in the next 3 years only a multinational exercise that will assist us in our capacity building initiatives. How did we find ourselves in this situation? This, I will give a picture of the last 3 financial years when it comes to funding requirements, where you compare full costing and actually what allocation we receive. Financial year 2021 and 2022, we only received 53% of the full costing, and only 33% of that 53% is available for operating budget. And this is where we started seeing the spares depots or spares levels at the depots depleting very fast. And as a result, we are faced to procure for a particular requirement, and we must at the same time live with the challenges relating to long lead times. So this negatively affects our readiness levels. Financial year 2022, we got 50% of the costing, and in this current financial year, only 48% of the costing. And over these last 3 years, only 33% of what is allocated to us goes to operating expenses. And this is the operating funds that we as well trying to take from to assist with the capacitating of the Armscor dockyard, as Armscor makes no contribution to this, to the capacity of the Armscor dockyard. It is the Navy's burden, and we take it up and assist because of the interest of the country to see these ships at sea. It is not easy for the Navy, and it's very hard to survive under these circumstances. Again, an indication of the backlog. Amatola, for example, in serial number 1, was commissioned in 2006, and the first scheduled refit was set for 2022, and there was no funding allocated for it. In 2015, we decided to take from the operating budget to refit SS Amatola, and in that particular year, 50% of the set activities were actually then grinded to halt in that 2015, because most money of the operating budget paid for the refit of Amatola. And this refit was a partial refit, as the most expensive part of the refit is the refitting of the combat suit and its related weapon systems, and that could just not be affordable. And the next refit was scheduled for 2018, revised to 2021, and has not commenced. In 2024, SS Amatola was scheduled to undergo midlife upgrades, and it is now revised for 2027. All other 3 platforms suffer the same fate, with Isandlwane, Spionkop, and Mendi never commenced any refit. And the absence of conducting these refits, because of what actually I indicated earlier, long lead times for parts and spares required to maintain these ships. Planned maintenance and preventative maintenance is very hard to achieve. That's why then the ships continue to deteriorate as the depot spares are not there. So SS Amatola, SS Isandlwane, SS Spionkop are non-operational with Mandy partially operational and presently still alongside with defect repairs after their deployment on the east coast of South Africa during February and March. And this is the ship for now, SS Mandy, that we will rely on to meet Corona obligations. The same things goes for submarines. SS Matantisi was commissioned in 2006. 2014 completed a partial refit, and again, even for submarine, we couldn't conduct combat suite refit as the cost was just too much for us to deal with under the operating budget. Then the next refit was scheduled for 2022, and it hasn't commenced. Presently, SAS Matantisi is busy with post-maintenance trials after completing its refit, its DED, docking and essential defects. It's scheduled for midlife upgrade in 2022, never commenced. We scheduled for refit for 2030, and the decommissioning period is 2038. But we cannot reach that long lifespan on these frigates and submarines as well due to poor state of maintenance. SA Charlotte Maxeke started refit in 2015 after being commissioned in 2007, and it hasn't completed this refit due to challenges of capacity within the dockyard. But with this additional funding, Charlotte Maxeke will benefit a lot because the additional funding provides dockyard with the opportunity to seek a competent professional contractor with the required technical expertise to conduct refits, which must be conducted within the specified time period to meet the target set for the spending of this 1.4 billion rands. For this 1.4 billion rands, we set to start refit of Queen Mojaji. And as we complete Charlotte Maxeke refit, we will start with the processes of procuring the required spares, but I will elaborate on a later slide on those issues. There's the status as I indicated. SS Matantisi is busy with post-maintenance trials and has sailed, I think about 2 weeks ago, but still we cannot dive because of a particular card that requires to be calibrated and can be calibrated only in Germany. And that takes a bit of time considering the developments in Eastern Europe. Charlotte Maxeke and Queen Mojaji the first will continue with the maintenance periods. The deferred submarine and frigate midlife upgrades and refits. Project sign was scheduled for upgrades of frigates, and the study report was completed but not approved with the estimated cost of 5 billion rands. There's no indication of future funding or funding for these activities. Project Napoleon was set for the upgrade of submarines, but the project study report here was approved to a tune of 3.8 billion. But all the money and the projects were halted as the funding was taken away for these critical requirements. There's no indication of future funding. This then is what I was referring to earlier, that they cannot survive the lifespan of 30 years that was set for from the build stage. So our refit plan, on receiving the National Treasury allocation of 1.4 billion for the execution of refits within the SAN has submitted a fleet refit plan to higher authorities, and subsequently through AMSCO submitted requests for bids in order to facilitate the refit processes for both submarine and frigates. Preliminary feedback from AMSCO on RFIs submitted last year is that 3 repair companies responded for the refit of the frigates. It must be noted, and it is explicitly narrated in the annual performance plan of this financial of 2023 MTEF, that the positive results or outputs of the 1.4 billion allocation will only be visible in financial year 25-26 due to the time required to complete the planned refits. As I indicated, it takes about 18 months for a submarine, and it takes about 24 months for a frigate by a competent contractor. AMSCO Dockyard will provide the SA Navy with a costed refit plan, which will include time frames. It will take for refits of the submarines and the frigates by 1st of June. That's the first milestone that the dockyard must meet and present to the South African Navy. There are the timelines from the receipt of the money, of the indication of the allocation on the 7th of December to 31st of this month. Dockyard is busy sourcing the refit partner. From 1st of June to 31st of December 2024, that's the time we'll be physically executing the refits. And between 1st of January 2025 to 31st March, we hope to conduct sea acceptance trials as a requirement after completing such a major maintenance period. This slide speaks to operational cycle over 2 years with the indication of the planned maintenance periods, but the focus is on this slide. Charlotte Maxeke, indicated on the slide as CMXE, is the one that is already in the shed conducting a refit that has begun in 2015. We hope that in March 2025, this refit will be completed and commence the refit of Queen Mojaji, indicated on the slide as QMOD. This is, as we're busy with Charlotte Maxeke, this is the indication I was giving for the planning phase for refit and ring fencing of funds to execute the refit of Queen Mojaji with critical milestones that speaks to battery removal and disposal. Moving on to the procurement of the new battery that will be fitted once we complete the refit of Queen Mojaji in 2027. Critical activities that needs to take place clearly indicated as milestones next to serial numbers on the left of the slide, with the first milestone for Queen Mojaji is contracting the technical support team from an expert organization where we require technical and oversight specialist services that must work with the dockyard. The second milestone is the defining of scope of work and satisfy the planning requirements for the program. Milestone 3, procurement of the resources required. I'm referring to material and spares and the necessary equipment that requires to be changed during this process of refit. And the last milestone, 4, monitor and control to address the program's gap. In terms of funding availability or commitment, we estimate in the first 12 months with these 4 milestones that we will use a minimum of 80 million rand. And in the next following year, which is year 2, on these 4 activities, a minimum of 120 million rands. We hope that it will also flow, which therefore means in the next 18 to 24 months for the submarine, beginning 1st April of this financial year, we will spend about 200 million rands on the submarine refit. Milestone 5, talking to frigates, we define the scope of work and satisfy the planning requirements for the program. With milestone 6, contracting of the program to a suitable contractor, and milestone 7, monitor and control to address the program's gap. So when it comes to frigate, the estimation is that during the first 12 months, with Dockyard having acquired a competent contractor, 120 million will be spent. And in the following 12 months, we scheduled or we planned to spend a minimum of 180 million. For the frigate, therefore, we hope and we intend to spend 300 million rand within the first 18 to 24 months. So the first 500 million over the next 2 years will be spent. The SA Navy will report on a quarterly and annually basis on the expenditure of the allocated National Treasury funding for naval systems, repair and maintenance. Critical milestones for the dockyard to complete the overhaul of the current procurement and acquisition processes, as was also one of the indications indicated in the medium-term budget of 2022-2023 by the Minister of Finance, that government entities to investigate the utilization of the individual fleet for purpose procurement system. And we leave this provision at the hands of Armscott Dockyard to exercise. Second critical success factor, stakeholders to report refit progress periodically, in fact, monthly, as we will be monitoring as the South African Navy, the progress of execution of these refits by the dockyard very closely. And lastly, strict compliance with and the enforcement of timelines. I must indicate that these timelines is not only the work of the Navy, but a combined integrated project team between Armscott Dockyard and the South African Navy. So Dockyard is fully comfortable with these timelines, and they take ownership of the timelines. But it is worth mentioning that Dockyard and its history, they have no capacity to achieve these objectives on their own without the support of a competent professional contractor with proven record that will actually take on these refits with the dockyard. An update on project status. Project Hotel, the new hydrographic capability for the South African Navy. I will focus on the side of acquisition elements and the status on the product, which speaks to product system level 5. The hydrographic survey vessel is the main platform that is procured with 3 survey motorboats and 1 sea boat. And as well, the upgrade of shore-based hydrographic office with the integrated logistic elements was part of the acquisition. The effective date of contract was 2017, December, and at the time, there was no indication of COVID-19. The initial delivery date was set for September 2022. The revised delivery date based on the approved force majeures was March, or is now March 2025. Here's a brief indication of where we are. The hydrographic capacity product system is at 54%. The platform is itself, hydrographic survey vessel is at 46%. Survey boats at 99%. Sea boat at 94%. And the shore facility, South African National Hydrographic Office, was completed and handed over to the South African Navy. The HSV construction is completed, except funnels, which are being used to act as access points into the vessel. So the following activities are still outstanding on the main platform: cable laying, placing of equipment, set to work, harbor acceptance trials, and sea acceptance trials. Then it will be commissioning and hand over. Most of the equipment required to complete the HSV, as much as it is at 46%, is already delivered. And all that is needed then now, after all those outstanding activities at the bottom of the slide, then the equipment will be fitted and close up the ship. In a more descriptive manner, what I said in the previous slide, that the HSV is at 46% and the delays for force majeures and commercial issues are the result of that 46%. Manufacturing is complete with the exception of the funnels, foundations, and other cutouts, which will be finalized once the large equipment has been installed on the HSV. The contractor SAS is currently in the pre-outfitting phase of the outfitting process. They are currently busy with the compartment readiness in preparation for the commencement of the work to be executed by subcontractors. The current work on the HSV includes cable trays, foundation for equipment, ducting penetrations, large and small bore piping, pinning for the insulation, preparation for the installation of the shaft line to get the platform ready for commissioning, of which commissioning includes systems integration, HAPA acceptance trials, C acceptance trials, and thereafter acceptance and reviews by the project before hand over the platform. The approved force majeures, it was 9 months for tank testing. And the second force majeure was as a result of Vatsila, a subcontractor that provides main engines to the platform. On delivery, there were some damages, NUMSA strike, and COVID-19 resulted in 7 months extension. Diluting of payment milestones as well, where now we had to, AMSCO had to pay the sub milestone instead of the end of the complete milestone due to cash flow challenges encountered by subcontractors, especially after COVID-19. Another force majeure followed as a result of floods. COVID was still on, and the July unrest, which led to additional 16 months extension. So those are delays that we have encountered on this project over this period that led now to the expected delivery date to 2025. In a nutshell, the project schedule, and I will focus on envisaged delivery dates. We hope to complete C acceptance trials in February 2025. But if nothing goes wrong or there's no additional requirement for a force majeure, we hope that the contractor can press to deliver the platform the earliest possible is September 2024. Highlights on this side of the project: majority of subcontractors have been reactivated. It took a bit of time for them to get back on their feet after COVID-19. 2 batches of items of supply were delivered. The first survey motorboat is in possession of the South African Navy. And as I indicated earlier, the hydrographic office as well was complete and handed over to the South African Navy. Replacement part for the propulsion equipment that was delivered by Vatsila, damaged during the transit, have been delivered and repairs are imminent. Equipment required for production on the job training to commence has arrived, and the training is scheduled to begin on the 21st of May and end on the 9th of June. What we're not too proud of, the delay in the delivery of the HSV and the impact of the commercial issues between the contractor and subcontractors was a negative blow to this project. There are the finances, focusing on paid to date, 1.9 billion, and the remaining amount is about 812 million. Take note that the project order value of contractual milestone outstanding is only 304 million rands. There were funding requirements or additional funding requirements for projected escalations based on consumer price index changes, as there was no adjustment that has been made since 2017. This is required to cover the contractual CPI escalation for future years. Moving on to Project Biro, much better performing project that speaks to the acquisition of 3 multi-mission inshore patrol vessels that will come with 3 boarding boats, 3 sea boats, and 2 boarding trailers. There was also a requirement for multi-mission offshore patrol vessels, but the RFO was withdrawn due to lack of funding, but it is still a valid requirement for the South African Navy. The effective date of this contract was January 2018, and again, during this period, there was no sign of COVID-19. The initial delivery date was February 2025 for the last platform, but the revised delivery date based on force majeures is now February 2026. The delay on this project is just 11 to 12 months, and we have no reason to be concerned. The first MMIPV, 100% complete and presently undergoing operational test and evaluation trials in Simonstown. MMIPV2 is at 90%, and the expected date of delivery is October this year. MMIPV3, well on track at 57%. And the first boarding boat as well was delivered with the first IPV. Boarding boat 2 and 3 are at 99%. Seaboat 1 on board the ship and 100% serviceable. Seaboat 2 and 3 as well at 99%. The 2 trailers for the boarding boats as well have been completed. That's a more descriptive slide that indicates what I presented on the previous slide. In terms of the overview of the progress on this one, the MMIPV1, first boarding boat, first sea boat, and both boarding trailers have been completed and delivered to the South African Navy. MMIPV2 is at the commissioning phase, busy with systems integration, HAPA acceptance trials, sea acceptance trials, and later on the acceptance and reviews by the AMSCO end project and hand over the platform to the Chief of the Navy in October this year. The MMIPV2 is still on the outfitting phase, busy with piping systems, mechanical and instrumentation, and the fitting of auxiliary systems, which that means as well, this platform is on time to be delivered. Force majeures that were approved for Project Biro affected the first IPV for about 4 months, MMIPV2 with about 4 months as well, and the last MMIPV 3 to 4 months extension on it. This is what makes us proud, as the project is performing very well. That's a project schedule for those who like to see it in Excel spreadsheet, but it's the same thing that I briefed the committee on previous slides. As I said, we have only good things to write home about when it comes to Project Biro. Upgrades on MMIPV1 software completed successfully. The defense signal network and crypto settings have been successfully configured by CETA. KSEK, the first, docked. In fact, is currently docked in Simonstown for warranty claims and awaiting undocking later this month. As well, the 20mm workshop tools and spares was delivered to Naval Stores Depot at Wingfield. That's the finance situation on Project Biro, with the paid to date amount being 2.9 billion and the remaining amount of contractual milestones outstanding is 531 million rand. Project escalations are based on as well on consumer price index changes, which amounts to 592 million rands, and there's no indication of any requirement for additional funding, as this project seemed to be set to be completed well on time and within the budget. In conclusion, by operationalizing the SA Navy's refit plan and successful delivery of Project Hotel and Biro will enable the SA Navy to ensure that the RSA is a true maritime nation, not by having access to sea only, but by having a secure and safe maritime domain, and by having a vibrant and effective shipbuilding in the country, capable of maintaining and repairing through industry. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, I submit.
Thank you very much, General, for the presentation, complete and straight to the point. A takeaway from the presentation is that you appear, in respect of the project hotel and the project Biro, you appear to be on schedule after factoring the delays occasioned by force majeure that we understand, and your presentation seems to be quite positive. That the contractors will deliver on the revised dates. So we'll hold you, General, to that. Quite positive and promising. It will definitely improve our prime mission equipment and the performance in general of the Navy, and but on the submarine and the frigates, the jury is still out, at least in respect of the submarine. You can hit the ground running because you have already identified people to work on the submarines, or the contractors to work on submarines. But the problem is with the frigates, that the request for proposals will soon be going out, and they've given us a period of about 24 months. But you have stressed, and I think I want to emphasize that you'll meet the delivery time on these two platforms, the submarines and the frigates, as only if a competent company or a partner to AMSCO or Dockyard with proven record is appointed. I cannot agree with you more that we don't have time to play for try and error. We need really to hit the ground running in that respect. And we also note the fact that the funding available is still inadequate to take you to the full delivery or to refit all three frigates and the two frigates, and also to ensure that the one frigate that is appears to be partially refitted is also fully refitted, as well as the submarine, the only submarine that is partially refitted is also fully refitted, so that they are able to live, they're able to survive for the period that it was given as the lifespan of these platforms. No, thank you very much for that presentation. I now open it up for platform. But you also say that the multi-offshore patrol vessel, even though you withdraw the RFO due to no funding, but it's still a valid requirement. We note that point. And all right, thank you very much. I now check if there are hands. Why am I raising a hand on the platform? Mr. Murray, you are number one.
Thank you.
Mr. Murray?
Thank you, Chair. Can I go?
Yes,
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. With your indulgence, I will also keep my video off because I'm in my car. Thank you for the presentation. This is really great, and it's to see, especially on Biro and Hotel, the good progress that has been reported. Admiral, is my assumption on the second inshore patrol vessel that it's already in the water? Because as I am driving regularly into town, I can see it is basically berthed just outside Diamond's offices. So it seems like it's already on the water, and so quite far, progress. So if that is correct, it is fantastic. And I recall that one of the previous presentations was also indicated that the third one is really developed far. I want to ask, if that is so, why is the force majeure period, the delay as a result of that, so much shorter in the case of the inshore patrol vessels compared to the refits of the frigates and the submarines? Why I'm asking that, the refits are done in Simonstown Naval Base. It's done by our company reporting to us being Arms Corps, but it seems like they are far behind. So that is a much more controllable environment, and it seems like we are lagging behind there compared to Damen, which is an outside company and a contractor who seems to be performing quite much better. Given that, and if you could respond to that, I want to ask specifically about the cost of the refits and the upgrades. In the past, I recall an amount was given to us of 750 million rand per frigate and about 500 million rand per submarine. But the cost that you have referred to, if I interpret this correctly, in that one slide, what is it, slide 11? You have indicated that the cost for the upgrades of the 4 frigates is 5 billion rand. So that's well over R1 billion each compared to the 750 million, and the submarines is 3.8 billion rand for the 3, which is actually more expensive per unit than the frigates. So that is something that is just odd to me, and I recall very clearly those figures being reported to us in the past, and I've always made the calculations. 3 times 750 is just over 2 billion rand, plus the submarines is about less than 4 billion rand. But now it seems like you are talking about 9 billion rand. And why is the refit per submarine so much more as the cost of per fit of the frigates? Those are, because that is very important figures that we must know exactly what is required, because if the current amount is then been granted, then we are still very, very far behind in terms of what we will require. I fully agree with the chairperson that we need to push for the upgrades of the frigates and the submarines. The one thing that I have picked up from your presentation, and I think we as a committee must take note of that. We were under the impression that the Mendi being so-called serviceable at this stage has already had certain refits. According to your chart and reporting now, that has not been done. So it seems like it was only basically brought into service specifically for the exercise Mosey and for the and for the Armed Forces Day in Natal. So to what extent is Mendi fully serviceable at this stage, despite the fact that it must still have all its refits and all its upgrades? And then, yeah, I think the, yeah, I also want to just touch on the OPVs. I think it's very, very important that we have to fully provide you with the resources that you must have to serve your purpose. I want to ask you, with regards to the Southern Ocean areas for search and rescue, how would you respond if there's currently a search and rescue in that Southern Ocean towards you know, Prince Edward Islands, and in fact anywhere on our waters that we are responsible for? Would we be able to do that? And to what extent will these vessels, especially the newer ones and the upgrades, help us in that regard? Chairperson, yeah, I think we must follow what they are saying. I think we must also maybe consider a visit to Daman, where the second IPV is now in the water and the third is nearing completion. I think it will be a good thing to see them in that stage already. But otherwise, you know, our Navy is of utmost strategic importance. And with our coastline and our EEZ, you know, we must, I think as a committee, we must commit ourselves to make sure that our Navy is properly resourced to fulfill. Just last question on the Project Hotel. You have talked about the handover that has already taken place with regards to the headquarters. If you could just explain that, what does that mean? Is that only a system that has been handed over? Is it a physical building? If it's a building, where is this building? Is it at Silvermine or is it in Simonstown? I just need to understand that part that has already been handed over, and you know, what is the nature of that? Chairperson, thank you so far. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murray. Mr. Rader.
Yes, good evening, Chairperson, colleagues, and everyone online. Thank you very much. Chair, I have two main questions. So the first one relates to, okay, we see the refits, so we see what looks like some positive news in terms of maintenance that is ongoing, and it's to be welcome. Can we just get an indication, you know, what's out there, what's serviceable at the moment, and you know, do we feel that we are currently adequately covered in terms of our responsibilities that we need to undertake in terms of both our domestic requirements, but also the channel duties that we've taken on? That's the first question, Chair. The second question relates to the staffing issues, and I think that one of the key issues that we've seen as a committee over time is that the financial woes of the department are closely tied to the staffing structure of the SANDF, generally speaking. So these repair times, it seems to indicate that there are going to be protracted periods where we will be, you know, have a number of our ships, of our assets off the water or out of the water, as it were. And you know, what happens to the staff while this is happening? do we have a full staff complement all sitting around the barracks? What happens there? Is this currently a case of, well, you know, we're going to allow a certain amount of attrition to take place, reduce staff numbers over time, and then if there's a need at a later stage, beef up again? What are the projections in that regard? So yeah, I mean, certainly I would like to derive some comfort that, first of all, we're not wasting people's time. Second of all, that we're not wasting too much South African taxpayers' money by having people sitting around ineffective whilst there's no equipment for them to practice their skills on and to be doing the job that they're required to do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Let me just check if the Thabo Mutle, Honorable Mutle.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I know Honorable Mare wanted me to speak after him. He was disadvantaged by the fact that he can't take a hand on my behalf. All right, no, thanks, Chair, and good evening to members and colleagues from the department. One, on Project Biro, they indicated there, I think, the delays caused by COVID for about 12 months. However, when you go to the finance slide, it indicates there that there are penalties. And I want to believe that penalties are invoked as a result of the contractor not being able to complete work as per the project program or timeline. Then the client will then invoke penalties in that regard to penalize the contractor for not adhering to time. I just want to get a clarity. How are these penalty affected, given that the force majeure has been approved, meaning that there is an extension of time. Once the contractor has time has been extended, how do you continue to penalize the contractor? There's something I don't understand there that probably can be clarified there. My second question is in line with from both Hotel and Biro. With Biro, there is there are advances in bracket is 2. Are those advance payment? I want to believe it's advance payment. What is an agreement between the contractor and the South African Navy, obviously with the involvement of Armsco, who will then facilitate this contract in the middle, facilitating this advance payment, and what are the underlying agreements between both parties to ensure that these advances that are made do not result in anything that might be questionable in terms of the prescripts of the law that actually governs how these payments should be done to contractors. Lastly, Chair, it's around looking at the figures that have been spent including what the monies that the Navy is making available for maintenance, refit, but most importantly on this big project, the Biro and Hotel, I would want to get a sense as to how is the Navy ensuring that these resources invested in this project, they do not only go to companies outside the country, they also ensure that local industry benefit. More so, how do they ensure that transformation is effected in that space? Can they assure us that, for an example, have they given those conditions to whoever was the contractor to ensure that historically disadvantaged new emerging contractors who want to participate in the space were given an opportunity to participate in the space, companies owned by women as well as military veterans, were they considered to be beneficiaries of this project, particularly Project Hotel and Project Biro? If they can clarify those questions, I will pause there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Muse. You want them to answer on that question, or you expect AMSCO to deal with it because they are the ones who are like the process owners. But I don't know. I'll leave it to them. Let me just correct one thing that I said. On the 3 submarines, Mantentis is partially refitted. We've noted that, and that it's required to be fully refitted so that it's able to live long and until the end of its lifespan. The Queen, the Matlake, Charlotte Matlake, is the one that I said the contractors have been appointed. The invitation and placement of contract will happen, started, and it's been given 6 months. Only then that the execution of refit will actually happen. Maybe my question, I understand the timeline. Has the contractor been appointed for Charlotte Matlage? I know that the Queen Mojaji will only, the contractor will be appointed once, you'll start working on it once you are done with Charlotte Matlage. You are still at the planning phase for the refit and ring fencing of funds. In other words, funds are not readily available for this one. All right, over to you, General. I was just correcting what I said when I said the contractor was already appointed for the 1 submarine. So you may then go ahead, General, with respond to the matters or comments of the colleagues.
Chair, if I may, Chair, maybe take this opportunity just to come in before the deputy answer some of the questions. To start, perhaps, I appreciate your comments, Mr. Chair, pertaining to the satisfaction of the committee by the presentation that we've actually tabled tonight. Maybe if I may, on the issues, the contractual issues that have been raised by the committee, especially pertaining to the financial arrangements between for hotel as well as Biro. I heard Mr. Murray proposing that perhaps the committee will be visiting, should take a visit to Damen. I take perhaps that will also later lead to visiting Southern African Ship Center Austral as well. I'll make a proposal that these questions be deferred to those visits, or be deferred to AMSCO, because AMSCO is the one that is actually running or managing these contracts on our behalf, and they are the one that actually negotiating the terms and conditions for these contracts in terms of the AMSCO Act, in terms of how do they go on to contracting companies pertaining to the transformative imperatives of the country. I don't want to contradict us to contradicting them in terms of when they present to this committee. I'll humbly request that perhaps those questions we defer them to when the committee meets with AMSCO in terms of answering those questions, if the chairperson will allow us.
Understood.
Mr. Murray, on the question of why the refits, the execution of the refits are far behind than the new build of both hotel as well as Biro. You will recall in our last engagement, and I would perhaps like to go back to that slide number 6, Admiral Hlang. The one that speaks about the full costing. Yeah, this one. Mr. Mar, you'll recall that in one of these sessions, I alluded to the fact that when the strategic defense packages were signed in 1999, and with the start build with the projects, then the building phase, which started around 2000, the allocation that was provided by government at the time, I keep on saying it was 80% towards the actual acquisition and 20% towards the true life support, towards the procurement of the integrated logistics element, especially the spares, which was actually in an anomaly in terms of the international standard, in that the integrated logistics spares, or the spares that were acquired, that allocation of 20% was totally not sufficient for us to be able to have the required depot stores for the life support of those frigates and submarines. The spares that we were able to acquire in 2000 did not even last us for the first 5 years after the commissioning of these boats. And that led us not being able to have the full depot stock holding that we actually required to be able to make sure that at any given time we're able to undertake any merging, any maintenance and any maintenance activity that actually arises. Why I'm saying this? this has definitely, this picture does not start now in 2013. It started way back. If we were to go some years back, we'll find that this picture has always been like this. So the knock-on effect of this whole thing is that when we needed to execute these maintenance and upkeep activities, we do not have the required spare parts for us to be able to undertake these refits. Normally, we've just been in Turkey, in Pakistan, just to benchmark in terms of how are they actually executing their refits. Once their dockyard takes a vessel into their refits, it doesn't take more than 12 to 18 months, because their depots already have the fully fledged required spares and spare parts that are actually required for them to undertake these refits. So when they place demands onto their depot for them to be able to execute these refits, those spares are readily available in their depot. Something which pre-1994 was how the SADF ran its activities, because all the depots, both Army, Air Force, and Navy, they were fully stocked because of the funding that was actually available at the time. But now, with what has actually happened since we emerged as SNDF, government has not been able to satisfy the true life support of these platforms, which has actually led to us being only funded 20% for the true life support of these boats, which now is actually causing us this deficit that we see, especially on this slide. The knock-on effect of that is that now, when we execute these refits and we run operations through procurement for something which we're not supposed to be doing. Procurement should be coming in as just as a stopgap filler where we don't have certain things, but where we shouldn't be reaching a minimum stock level of less than 60% for us to be able to conduct effective and sustainable operations. Now we execute refits, and whilst we were busy with the refit, we find that there's a defective component right in the middle of the refit due to scope creep. When we go to our depots, we find that spare part is not available. Now we must start the procurement process. And the lead times associated with the production of that spare part is not a 1 day or a 2 day matter. Sometimes it ends up being a year. Unlike with the production, these companies are able to produce these things because they got the contracts far earlier, and they were able to in terms of their build program, to reserve all the parts that are needed for them to be able to complete the build, to meet their contractual milestone and be able to deliver these boats on time, as it is actually happening, has been proven by Damen, and to a certain extent by Southern African, by Sendog. You see, it's unlike with us running operations. We are dependent on this 33% of the operating budget still to be undertaking and executing procurement which has its own limitations in terms of all the issues that we know around. To Mr. Raider, what is presently serviceable with respect to from the frigates and SSK? If we were to stick to the normal naval to, if we're to be strict as the SA Navy, of which is something that we've now done. We said that we're not going to commit any of our platforms up until on major activities, because we want to minimize the disaster at sea due to the backlog in terms of the maintenance and upkeep that has not been done for all these years. One can say today that the Navy frigates and submarines are definitely non-operational. If we were to look on the number of defects that these platforms are presently experiencing, because we are operating these frigates and submarines at risk, you see, and if we continue operating them in this current state that they are in, this can actually lead us to a maritime disaster, something which it has never happened here in South Africa, and as a Navy Command Council, we vowed that it is not going to happen on our watch. We'll do all that we can to make sure that we stick to our maintenance and upkeep. To answer you, these platforms are not fit to go to sea, so there's nothing operational. Even Mendy, we are actually trying to keep Mendy afloat, but Mendy cannot fight. She can move, but not able to fight, and she can stay afloat, but afloat at risk. See, because the hull integrity, as well as everything else that is associated with these platforms, needs to be attended to as a matter of urgency. Hence, we are saying that these refits cannot be postponed any further. We appreciate the contribution or the allocation that National Treasury has actually provided us. Thanks to this committee for actually championing this on our behalf, so that we can be able to minimize this risk going forward. It's just so unfortunate that Armscor Dockyard, as our level 3 strategic refit partner, does not have this capacity to be able to provide us this service. And this is not starting only now in 2021. This is something that actually it's been there. And as the SA Navy, we picked this up many years ago. I'll actually refer myself to 2009, when we did a strategic review of the capacity available within the dockyard for it to be able to provide us that level 3 strategic refit capability. We established that at that time in 2009, the dockyard only operated with 1 welder. But then we did an assessment in terms of what is it that can be done. And we came with a strategic rejuvenation plan, which was costed, and we gave it to Armscor executive and Armscor to actually champion that, which was costed to plus minus 800 and something million rand. But what did Armscor do? Armscor did nothing in terms of going to its political principle to go and require and request for funding for it to be able to capacitate itself. But it depended only on the SNA. From the 33% that we actually have there of the operating budget, we must give a certain percentage of that, which is a fixed cost to Armscor to be able to run it, to Armscor Dockyard to be able to run its business. Somewhere in the presentation, the deputy also brought to the attention of the committee that the Navy 3 years ago gave Armscor Dockyard money to be able to establish a submarine repair work group, something which it has never happened before. Armscor always had a submarine repair work group, but over time, due to lack of recruitment within the yard, that's those skills and as well as the normal retirement, those people actually ended up retiring, and that skill never existed again in the yard. But as the SEN, we took a conscious decision, as we did in 2012, in 2013, when we gave them 39 million rand to go and recruit extra artisans to capacitate themselves. But with this money that we gave them 3 years ago, they've only been able to recruit plus minus 62 artisans. which have now been ring-fenced to be part to constitute the submarine repair work group. Now, with this competent and professional and experienced service provider that AMSCO is actually insourcing for them to be able to execute the refit of Sheltered Maclaka, because AMSCO Dockyard does not have that capacity, as well as to be able to refit Khune Modjadji. So these 62 members that have been employed by AMSCO Dockyard, the intention is that this service provider that AMSCO is actually going to insource will work hand in glove with these members as part of their on-the-job training to capacitate themselves to be able to undertake future refits without the services of this contractor. So that is how we're trying to mitigate this matter. Chair, there is no contractor that has yet been appointed for Sheltered Maclaka or Khune Modjadji. AMSCO has been undertaking the refit of Sheltered Maclaka since 2014, but they've been unable to actually complete this refit. So what we've resolved in consultation with them is that they must go and source a professional service provider, experience, but not the OEM, to be able to complete this refit. So this is what the deputy was actually saying, that now this professional experience and knowledgeable service provider is the one that will be working hand in glove with this submarine repair work group within the dockyard to complete the refit of Sheltered Maclaka. And on completion of that, then they will then simultaneously start with the refit of Khune Modjadji. That is what is actually planned to happen. There's no contractor that is yet been appointed. Okay. Deputy, I think you can follow on from there.
Thank you, sir. And thank you, Honorable Chair. My chief has covered almost all these questions, but I can confirm that indeed the second IPV is in the water, and soon, in fact, it's going to be taken out of the water to look or do some underwater work, because indeed it has been on the water for quite some time, and it is on the last legs now of completing the process. The costing of these submarines and frigate refits will in fact be clear only after the dockyard has received bids and identified the service provider. But I can mention that we refitted SS Amadola, as was indicated on the slide, between 2015 and 2016, with an amount of over 300 million rands. And that was a partial refit. As I indicated in my presentation, that the combat suite refit hasn't taken place. And the current funding as well, we hope that it will cover great aspects of the combat suite. But when it speaks to combat suite, it's probably capacity will have to be sourced outside the country, as the original equipment manufacturers for these systems are outside the country and they own the IPT and they have the expertise. You wouldn't like in your combat suite to get any other person to come and push his luck on these highly technical systems. So we cannot really confirm the cost until such time that a contract has been identified and ARMSCO will therefore indicate. These are all cost estimates rather than confirmed figures. In terms of Southern Ocean rescues, we've done that quite a number of times. Probably I must qualify by saying long time ago. With 3 frigates of the 4 down, it's a clear indication that we no longer have reach to the deeper oceans. And the Southern Oceans are known as unforgiving oceans, and not any kind of platform is suitable for those areas. Even if we can catch up on IPVs and get them ready, they will never reach there. That is why we're indicating that the requirement for the offshore patrol vessels is still relevant. Because for now, with frigates going down on major maintenances, they themselves will have a very short reach. And the reasons for short reach speaks to the issues of range. When you consider range of the platform, it speaks to certain minimum number of on-board spares for such kind of deployments. These are the spares that the Chief of the Navy is indicating that they are non-existent. If a ship goes out, like in the case of Mandy, Mandy was not necessarily rushed, it got ready for armed forces and exercise mercy. Mandy has been working up since last year, and Mandy hasn't completed any refit. If a system, I will take for example, Spionkop, we deployed to Opvikela, something broke, and through procurement processes, we try to acquire that particular spare part, and the lead time was a minimum time of 18 months, because some of these parts are no longer available and must be manufactured. Those are all the factors that speaks to lead times. Ship goes out, encounter a defect, operational defect, then it has to come back because you no longer have range. And you have to come back and actually start the procurement processes to procure that part. No Navy worth its salt operates in that manner. We are right deep under the ocean and we're trying to surface. We're trying to maintain our heads above the water. It's not fair. And when things are not happening, people look at us as incompetent in our responsibilities. But it's the situation that we find ourselves in. The tendency is to acquire expensive prime mission equipment but there's no baseline adjustment in your budget. When we acquired these platforms, we were a small ship navy that had abundance of spares in the depots. And that's what we inherited in 1994. But when Project Wales and Project Citron was signed and approved and ships delivered, there was no baseline adjustment on our budget. And we were expected to run this Navy with the budget of a small ship Navy that had abundance of spares. We're trying very hard here. The issue, Hydrographic Office, Honorable Member, this project came with a rejuvenation of systems as we were moving from the hydraulic type of operations when producing charts to digital. It's all new set that meets the standards of today in terms of technology that now we benefited as a result of Project Hotel. So it is based at Silver Mine, as it's always been there, the Hydrographic Office. So the question of our oceans being adequately covered, I can say we have eyes out there. Response is a different story. When we pick up something, the response must come from the Navy and the Air Force working together. And that capacity is limited as the Air Force is going through its own challenges. Honorable Member, in the Navy, we don't stay in barracks. Those you will find in barracks will be those that just come off duty. And between normal working hours, members are in their workspace and they are gainfully employed and utilized. We have simulators to cover up gaps to certain extent, as simulators as well in terms of maintenance. They fall in the queue with the main platforms themselves. So we are fighting and working very hard to maintain the warfighting skills as the Navy. And our setup doesn't allow us to send people home, and we'll call them when the ships are ready. There's no waste of government or taxpayers' money as we work hard to maintain and keep shining the skills that we are to maintain. It takes a bit of time to build a team capable of warfighting, especially in the days when our main role becomes a policing role. And very limited time because of ships' availability to competently maintain the three-dimensional warfare skills that we must keep honing. Yeah, the issue of penalties, the issues of agreements with contractors, the chief made it clear it's actually Armscor's part of ship. We don't interfere and we're not supposed to interfere with that process. We as well get briefings when we're visiting the contractors. But anything we need done through our Director Naval Acquisition, we communicate with Armscor. It's only Armscor that must speak to the contractor. Thank you very much, and I submit, Chair.
Thank you very much, General.
Chair,
I don't know.
Honorable Chair.
Yes, Chief. It's yourself, Chief.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to emphasize one thing. Thanks for, I'm sorry for dragging this matter. The issue of the spares availability once again. It's not a matter that, as I've said, it's not a matter that we actually dictated now as the sort of. I would like to give a practical example. Once again, I was the Deputy Project Officer for the acquisition of the submarines, Project Wheels, and I was based in Germany for 7 years. When we detected that the allocation in the strategic defense packages was skewed in terms of 80% for acquisition and 20% for the true life support was inadequate. In 2002, Admiral Mutimo visited us. He was the chief of the Navy then. He visited us in Germany. And I requested an audience with him. And I said, Admiral, I request us to go and sit by the Elbe River, not in your hotel. There's something critical, that a risk that I'm actually seeing here. He said, Mondo, what? I said, and then we went and sat by the Elbe River. And then I told him, I said, the risk that I'm seeing here, after the delivery of these boats, is that what is happening here in the project, we are not being allocated enough resources for us to be able to support these boats once they are after they are delivered. And that was the same scenario with Project Citron. And then he asked me, Monde, what then do you recommend? I said, Admiral, I recommend that you go to your political principles and ask for an extra R1 for us to be able to bridge this gap that to mitigate this risk that I'm seeing here now in 2002. 21 years, and let me not say 21 years later, 7 years later, I was then appointed as Director of Fleet Logistics, where I was then faced with this problem. All that the deputy is actually saying, it's something that dates back to 2002. Now, 21 years later, we are still sitting with this problem, but we really appreciate National Treasury's intervention with this 1.4 billion rand that they've actually allocated that, thanks to the support of this committee. But that 1.4 is 1.4 billion too little versus the risk that we are sitting with as the South African Navy, that today we are unable to provide the required maritime defense, which is sustainable, effective Navy. It's not because of the lack of will from our side, as the deputy has actually said. I think going forward, the 8.5 billion rand that we said that we need for the upgrades of these frigates and submarines, I would like to plead with the committee to do all in its power to whisper to National Treasury the risk that is associated pertaining to non-funding of the South African Navy, because we don't. It will be. It's not that now. It is not a disaster. We actually have to avert this disaster. I know I'm speaking to the converted in this committee, but I would like to emphasize this matter that for us, because these refits are not only going to end now, we're still going to have to undertake these refits after 6 years. So let's use this period between now whilst we're executing these refits to try and correct the baseline funding requirement of the SA Navy, not only for frigates and submarines, because the MIPVs that we are also receiving in terms of the allocation for the true life support of these boats, of these vessels, we are given plus minus 200 million rand, and with 200 million rand for 30 years, for 30-year lifespan of these platforms is totally not sufficient and not sustainable. The MIPVs were going to find themselves in the same situation where we find the frigates and submarines now. So I think as members of this committee, it's a pity that National Treasury is not here to listen to this presentation. It would have been to the benefit of us all if they were here to also listen to what we are saying. Thanks, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, General. Rest assured that we have listened to you, and you have in fact, we have in our heart your interest. So we will follow through some of the issues that you have raised today. Let me just cite a few things that we will follow through. You said you've cut down on multinational exercises, and you are only doing those that are really necessary. Perhaps we must invite you at some point to come and talk to us as to what are the implications of that decision. So we'll not deal with that today, but I think we must open up just a platform where you just give us the implications. We understand that is as a result of platforms not being available, that you had to cut down on some of the exercises. But we want to see what impact that has generally on the preparedness and the readiness of the Navy. And what are you proposing we do as an intervention? And but I think, as I said, is maybe linked to what we are dealing with, the availability of platforms, which we are busy trying to deal with, but we'll deal with it when you come to us at some point. And then two, the stock levels that are depleting very fast. And you see, until you say that in your statement that we must maintain at least a 60% stock level. It must not be less than 60%, so that you are then able to attend to emergencies that come about. So in some cases, come about as a result of unavoidable scope creep, which demand spares that were not initially anticipated, and that now forcing you to start the procurement again and then suffer the long lead time, because we're dealing here with platforms that were 20 years old or close to 20 years old. And some of the spares may not be in production. So a production line needs to be adjusted so that they can actually be manufactured and made available to you. So I think we must drill down into that. It's just that you don't have a target that speaks to this in your annual performance plan. Maybe you've got it classified, but you don't open up to us on it so that we can then follow up. Why is the stock level, why has it dropped to below 60%? And if it is the question of funding, we deal with it at that time. I don't know, please consider that, or probably we bring it up as an item on its own. We've started discussing this item with AMSCO, but it was in general terms. But I think we must move away now from general terms to specifics. AMSCO for SA Air Force, sorry, spares for SA Air Force, spares for Navy, and maybe spares for the Army. And I think the Army is crying out the same thing. They have to be, some vehicles have to be out of service due to non-availability of spares. We picked that up when we were on the board. There's a tire burst, there's no tire in stock, and that vehicle has to be withdrawn, sometimes for a very long period. So these are matters that we need to start looking into as a committee. Drill down now. Maybe we have started with the major platforms. I think we're doing fine. But we need, as we tackle the major platforms, which I would consider as macro matters, we now need to also look at the micro and focus specifically on the stock levels, because they also impact on the availability or the serviceability of our platforms. We'll deal with that in the future. And then you also indicate that, which is linked to the issue of spares, that there is no baseline maintenance or a budget or inadequate baseline maintenance budget. And you indicate the ratio between acquisition and support stroke maintenance budget. I think we need to look at that, because we can't focus on acquisition only. Very soon we'll be acquiring all the Project Hotel will come online, fully online. The Project Biro, they've started delivering on it. And so if we don't have the maintenance budget clearly visible, and it means that these newly built will also suffer the same fate. And we'll then ask ourselves, what's the point of spending so much on the acquisition when you don't have a maintenance plan? Or you do have the maintenance plan, but you don't have money to give effect to it. So those are issues that we need to quickly move on it. And then thirdly, We will focus on the dockyard, on the capacity of the dockyard, and there's funding available, or funding that has been made available, and that would require dockyard to increase its capacity so that it's able to undertake some of the maintenance programs and stroke refit, that the maintenance stroke refit programs. And we are not happy that they've taken long to deliver on the on project Makake. And we see, which may be as a result of, it may be due to what you call, inadequate capacity at that level. But we will follow that up with AMSCO. So in other words, we must not, AMSCO must also increase its capability as funding being made available to, or become available to actually maintain our platforms. And so we appreciate that they are what you call they're reintroducing the submarine repair work group that got repleted when the experienced what you call artisans retired and left the service. And I think we also need to invest in this new artisanship skill. I don't know if I'm calling it correct. So that we build a capacity. In other words, this industrialization, the industrialization or the maintenance stroke refit program must have a skill transfer as part of its program, so that we don't have to rely on, we have a home, what you call it, we build our own timber, a homegrown skill, as it were. So we thank you for the presentation tonight. We were honest and pleading with us to support you, and you definitely, I'll come back to you. Is that Tabo? Is that your tour, Tabo? I'll come back to you.
Yes, Chair.
I'll come back to you. Yeah, we will support you as you move on. Again, we have agreed that we'll conduct an oversight tour in the dockyard. We'll also visit your shipbuilding yard here in the shipbuilding yard here in Durban, and so that we see the shipbuilding yard that is here in Durban, so that we see progress on the platforms that are on these two shipyards. Tabo, you wanted to say something before I ask the DM to wind up on this discussion?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to verify if I heard correctly when the chief was responding to my question. I thought maybe I had missed some point when he said transformative issues can be directed to AMSCO.
No, he said they are contractual matters, and we need to, AMSCO is the best people to deal with that aspect. They don't want to venture into it so that for fear of contradicting AMSCO.
Yes. No, I accept that, Chair. But remember, that was not the only question. The second question was around advances as well as the penalties imposed on, I think it's Project Biro, given the fact that extension of time probably should have been granted as a result of force majeure that they have alluded to. So I don't think they have spoken to that in particular.
Okay. General, if you could just quickly deal with this one. I think it got omitted.
Thanks, Chair. My apologies to Mr. Muntle for not coming clear on this issue. I think the issues of extension as well as penalties, these are all contractual matters which perhaps I will recommend that they be put to AMSCO, as they are the ones that are actually managing and determining at what point a penalty must be imposed on the company and so forth, and not at what point an extension must be granted for a project and so forth and so forth. I'll humbly request that, as I've said, with the issue of costs, that can these be actually be taken up with AMSCO, as they are the contracting parties, our contracting party pertaining to the acquisitions as well as procurement.
Okay. All right. Thabo, are you happy with the response that people who can best, competent to deal with this issue are those who are managing the contract on behalf of the department?
Accepted, Chair.
Okay, we'll take it up. Please make a note in the minutes that we'll take it up with AMSCO. All right, I think we've dealt with all the issues. DM, please wind up the discussion on these two items that were on the agenda. The department covered both of them in their presentation. So over to you, sir.
No, co-chair of the Joint Standing Committee and honorable members, I really do not want to say much to what has been ventilated in this meeting. It is, I think, evident to all of us from the comments that the Chief Navy has been making from time to time in the discussion that we need to have AMSCO sitting together with the SA Navy to have a proper handle on the issues pertaining to the work that must be prosecuted to make sure that with the little money we have, the naval systems that we use are made available to the best of our ability. When you look at, of course, the funding against what we need, it's a huge deficit. But we cannot bemoan that situation year in and year out and from one meeting to another. The point that we must importantly track is what are the subjective weaknesses in this work which we can purposefully and in a focused way seek to minimize, that would give us better mileage. That for me is what is critical. With the little resources financially that we get, we need to be more purposeful, we need to be smart, but we also need discipline. We also need discipline. I'm talking discipline in relation to the decisions we make. We've got to optimize opportunities. We've got to optimize opportunities. Good example that one can just share is, for instance, the state of our maritime domain awareness. The system is not there, but we can actually make sure that that maritime domain awareness challenge that we have as a country, it's dealt with, as the admirals themselves have pointed to the possibility of us networking the sensors of both the South African Navy and what is this? Portnet, authorities. If we can have a system that pulls all those sensors, those radar systems together, we can seal our coastal area throughout, only with very minimum financial resources, as I was told by the very same leadership of the Navy. If they were saying this is possible with about 20 million rands, what is 20 million rands in the monies that go through the hands of the leadership of the South African Navy? So my point is that we need to have, we've got to, in the same spirit that Mr. Mutle is raising these questions, we need to drill down into the details to make sure that on an annual basis, are the plans that we were discussing, for instance, just a week ago, of the Department of Defense in relation to the Navy, putting work that is to be done and the targets for the year from quarter to quarter, right up to the end of the financial year, are those plans conk? We have challenges, but these challenges, there are those we can't do much about. We have limited money, but there are those also that we can do something about. That is what I would say by way of rounding off the discussions that we have had, and the issue around Project Hotel, the situation that is reported in this presentation about the commercial contracts, that Sandock has, the issues that they have with their subcontractors. We need to know what is the situation as we speak now. Are those challenges being resolved? Because if we do not follow up on those details, and AMSCO must be here to tell us, yes, there were challenges there, they are now resolved. Because we may talk about a Project Hotel as a project that we are sure that by January next year it will be delivered, only to find that come January we are told that there is another extension because there were issues that were below the line. So those issues, I think it is important for us to deal with them. Otherwise, I'm happy for the time the admirals took to take the Joint Standing Committee through the information that they have shared. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, General. Colleagues, we have exhausted the discussion on the issue or the matters that we had actually asked the department to come and brief us on. General Ramazwana, I think we have concluded the discussion, and let me thank you and as the Chief of Staff, as well as the General, the Navy, the Vice Admiral, the Rear Admiral, and the team that is in the meeting to support them, and all other colleagues from the Department of Defense for this frank engagement with the committee. We've exhausted the items with you. You are then free to exit the platform. And after this, we would then discuss matters that are internal to the committee. DM, thank you very much for your support and the fact that as the principal, you are always in our meeting to take these issues and deal with them at your level. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Chairperson.
Thank you. All right. The next item on the agenda is the minutes, Nandipa. That's all.
Yes, Chair, only one set.
But before the minutes, can we take the update on the trip? I'm sorry to bring this one up. There are new developments that I want us to reflect on before we deal with the minutes. Velem is going to take us to brief us about those the new developments. Velem.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening again, members. Yes, this study tour of ours has not been without its ups and downs. Subsequent to the tour being approved by the Speaker of Parliament and all the relevant quotes having been obtained, we made a decision in consultation with the South African Embassy in Turkey to switch the visit around. Members will recall that we discussed this on the WhatsApp group last week. So the plan changed. Just instead of going to Turkey first, we were going to Germany first and then visit Turkey afterwards. Unfortunately, in subsequent developments, we received a letter from the South African ambassador to Turkey stating that there has been additional holidays declared in Turkey, which now overlaps with our time period in Turkey. And basically, it would not be very feasible to have a study tour in that period because most businesses and definitely most government institutions would be closed over that period. So that should also be seen in the context that we only were allowed by Parliament that 1 week for the oversight, which we stretched to the 2 weekends and the Monday as well. But in essence, there is no way to accommodate days in Turkey that doesn't overlap with the public holidays in Turkey. So that being said, it does not bode very well for a visit to Turkey, which is really a pity, as members would recall that there's much we can learn from Turkey. But given that there's only 1 week allowed for this study tour, the alternative option then is to extend the committee's stay in Germany and perhaps maximize the stay in Germany and add additional items to the agenda in Germany. There's much to be learned in Germany on a number of levels in terms of the defense industry, in terms of their human resources management, and even we can include matters such as veterans management in Germany. So the suggestion at this stage, members, is that we still depart as planned on the 24th of June, and then instead of flying on the Thursday, which would have been the 29th of June to Turkey, we extend our stay and come back on Saturday evening, the 1st of July. So basically, we'll have a full week in Germany to maximize engagements with German counterparts and industry role players in Germany. So that is the suggestion. Chair, maybe you can have further input on that, but that is the suggestion at this stage. We will run that by the South African Embassy in Germany. Unfortunately, today was a public holiday in Germany, so they were not in the office, but hopefully we can get hold of them tomorrow to finalize it. But that being said, that is the suggestion on the table, Chair, to have a full, maximally used week in Germany. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Any comment, Mr. Murray?
Chairperson, yeah, thank you very much, Wilhelm, for all these efforts and things that you've done. It is much appreciated, you and Nandipa. Chair, I agree with Wilhelm that there's a lot to learn in Germany. We must also remember that there are at least 2 partners of the NEL, also which is German companies. The one is Hensoldt and the other one is Rheinmetall, who we have got a direct relation with via Hensoldt South Africa and via RTM. in South Africa. So we can also include them in our visit, and I know that they will probably be very well prepared to receive us in Germany, and so we can really make use of that time in Germany to learn quite a lot and to get an exposure also to the defense industry, and things that we need to look at. So I want to support that proposal of Willem. And if you are also in favor of that, that will be wonderful. So yeah, that is where I want to contribute. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comment? Kenny Motsomai?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, my hand was up because I wanted to add on the issue that was raised by the DM, but well, I didn't want to jump like a chicken that doesn't have a head, that you jump without being pointed by you. But I've decided, let me just leave it because you failed to call me. By the way, I support we must go to Germany.
My apologies, Mr. Motsomai. I did not notice your hand, but you may continue on this item that is under discussion now.
Okay, Chair, I support that we must go to Germany because we have a lot of problem within our army. And when you look to Germany, they are moving well. Their life is progressive. If we can visit them and see a lot of things, even in the issue of the military veterans, if we can go to Germany and see, when we come back, maybe we will even know how to treat our military veterans within our country.
Yeah.
Especially on the issues of housing and on the issue of, especially on army. I think we must take Germany. It's a good idea to visit Germany. I support it.
Yeah, we have added that, Mr. Motsomai. Mr. Motsomai, we have added that as one of the objectives. Just the general welfare of our soldiers post retirement, post service. You are correct. We would be looking at that as well. Any other colleagues? But let me raise this thing. Lehwasa is on the platform. Lehwasa, are you on the platform?
Yes, I am, Chair.
Yeah. I think I must apologize officially that we were working on the assumption that she would be on she will go with the Home Affairs committee, because they also have their study tour around the same time. And I only learned just yesterday that the Home Affairs was also thinking that she was going with us.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
And so she fell through the crack.
Include her, it's not too late. It's not too late. Include her with us.
Oh, make a plan. Make a plan.
Yes, it is not too late. What forced the two committees to, start to work, reduce numbers by elimination, was because the speaker was insisting that she would only allow 9 members of the committee to go on a study tour. And so we were able to twist their arm with the 11 members. The decision was that she could only go up to 9. So we motivated that we have dropped the numbers from 14 to 9, So happened that the co-chair did not have, was not ready with his, what do you call this, with his official passport.
Correct.
Until about how many, about 2 weeks ago, Nandipa? Until about
Yes, Chair.
and recently. So because he had not responded to the deadline that we set for ourselves, so, and could not form part of the application. So that's how his name was left out. And so, and then Nkosi Cebekulu had indicated that due to health conditions, she's requesting that we take her name out. So, and then the third person, who's the third person, is Nkosi Cebekulu, and it was, then Lekwase. The discussion was that Home Affairs, we will take it on board. And so we then reduced 14 to 11. And then we were still thinking that we would be forced to cut it down from 11 to 9. But when we advanced the arguments that these are the efforts that we made on our own to try and meet them halfway, they accepted the application. And I doubt if they will accept moving the numbers up from 11 to 12 on those bases. In other words, we twisted their arm from 11, from 9 to 11, because there was visible evidence on our part that we really try to bring the numbers down. We had a difficulty in arriving at that decision. I also think that my counterpart in the Home Affairs also had a difficulty in arriving at the same decision. Lekwase, how many people are going on that tour? Because we have 9. I mean, if they have 9, it means that they can move to 11 as well. Do you know how many people are going on the tour?
No, Chair, I have no idea.
You have no idea. Tabo, can you just do a follow-up and check if they cannot move their numbers from 9 to 10? There is already a precedent.
For our team.
In order to accommodate Lekwase. I'm saying, because remember, you intervened and spoke to the speaker, and I spoke to the house chairs, that we were able to be allowed to move to have 11 instead of 9. So I'm actually saying, can you also intercede on behalf of our colleague?
Okay, no, it's fine. I'll do that. Willem, from his side, he can then amend the list so that we push it through.
We can't amend ours.
Yeah, I think Chair, I think Chair, he understood you incorrectly. No, I think Mr. Moodley understood you incorrectly.
Yes.
It is Home Affairs.
Assistant
Home Affairs that
No, it's understood, Chair. I'll talk to Honorable Chawane, the Chair, as well as the Speaker, so that we see if they can manage. If we are not winning, I know Shelembe might give that space to Honorable Lukas.
Shelembe is a good man. All right.
Hey, Tabo, don't try that.
Colleagues, thank you very much. We'll close this discussion on the note that we have no choice but to accept what Willem is proposing.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
All right. And then can we move to the minutes as the last item?
You see them, Chair?
Yes, colleagues, these are the minutes. It's a briefing by the Minister of Defense and the COS on the level of satisfaction with services rendered by DINEL and efforts to improve cooperation. And then it was consideration of the deployment letters and then the issue of study tour and the minutes. Those were the matters for transaction on the day. This is the attendance register. Please complete the attendance register. Thank you. Complete.
Chair, just on a point there.
Yes,
Sorry.
yes, on the point.
You know, as we are a joint standing committee, previously I think the minutes have reflected which members are from the NCOP on the attendance register. I don't notice it now. Perhaps it's me, but in the past I thought there was normally not only divided by party, but there was an indication of which members were from which house. I'm not sure if that's correct or not, or if it's required. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, please check that with your manager.
Okay, well, do, Chair.
Yeah, please do. If that is the requirement, you'll come and tell us it's a requirement. But if it is not a requirement, I think Mr. Reiter is correct. All right, maybe there's a reason. All right, so that's the thing, attendance. That's page 1 for correction, colleagues.
Chair, I've raised my hand.
Yes, can you just let the Angie, your hand is up.
I just raised the hand to correct my surname. I see it keeps on coming with THLE instead of TLHE. The last 4 letters there.
Oh, I see.
Can it be corrected? But otherwise, I've read the minutes page by
So
page.
how then do you pronounce it? Ped.
Ped.
Ped. Okay. All right. No, thank you so much. You know,
That's
it's
between T and H.
the L is between T and H.
Yes.
Okay. No, thank you so much. All right. We're on page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Okay, that's the end of the thing. Colleagues, are there any further amendments to introduce?
I propose for the acceptance.
Mr. Mare proposes for the acceptance.
I do second.
Ms. Betle seconds. Colleagues, the minutes are duly adopted. Let me thank all of you for a fruitful meeting. And until we meet again, good night. And the meeting is then adjourned.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you and good night.
Thank you, Chair.